Thanks for joining us. This is Film Talk Weekly. I'm your guest host, Castle Cersei. We are right now we're live in Oaxaca, Mexico. Oaxaca City, is that how
Oaxaca City.
Okay, and I'm here with Tony White. And Tony White is a journalist, a freelance journalist, and a filmmaker, storyline editor for Sons of Mezcal. And that's why we're talking today, even though I feel like I could talk to you about a million things that you do. Tell us about Sons of Mezcal and give us a brief overview and then we'll dig in.
Sure. I worked on the film as a storyline editor, so I was involved entirely in the post-production side of it.
Okay.
But my friend Stefan Work, as the director, he shot the film in Oaxaca in 2018. Okay. And the basic storyline is that it follows four families in Oaxaca, mezcal producing families, in a first-person cinema verite style perspective. And the whole premise is about the generational connection that mezcal makes within certain families, and how that lineage carries down from the forefathers to the present and passes on to the younger generation, and how that cultural connection of mezcal is very strong in certain families and in certain villages. So there's a lot of shots where there's grandfathers and fathers and children. It's a whole family too. It's not just like a patriarchal kind of story at all. It's all about families. So but that's essentially the concept that we really wanted to talk about, generational connection that mezcal has.
And it's a feature film.
It is. It's a 75-minute piece.
Okay.
And from the opening scene, as you see, it's a cinema verite style first person perspective.
And for the people
Sure,
we don't know what cinema verite is.
it's essentially you are a first person perspective throughout the film. You're in the car with Don Jose.
Okay.
You're in the palenques. You're looking through the camera. There's no talking heads. There's no lower third introductions. We're proud to say that the film was entirely shot and narrated. I mean, it was entirely narrated in Zapotec, which is the native language from this part of Mexico.
Okay.
And so the patriarch of the film, Don Jose, narrates the entire film. When there's not actual dialogue happening on screen.
And so subtitles?
There's subtitles. So what he spoke in Zapotec the entire film, and so we have two versions. There's an English subtitled version and a Spanish subtitled. Okay. We weren't interested in overdubbing. We wanted Don Jose's voice to be present in the film. But yeah, it's a very cool concept that takes you deep into the moment in the very first scene, and you don't leave the entire time.
So a storyline editor, so there was a story ahead of time, right?
There was the concept of following four specific families from four different parts of Oaxaca. And that was all prearranged with Stefan and his contacts here in Oaxaca. Okay. Coincidentally, I knew those families as well. I worked in the mezcal bar industry in Denver for years, and then I moved to Oaxaca kind of because of that. Okay. But the coincidental connection was Stefan was here shooting the film in 2018 while I was living here working for a month. And it turns out that the families that were featured in the film are the same families that worked with the bar that I was connected with.
How does that happen? Yeah.
Oaxaca is it's a very serendipitous place.
Yeah.
And it just happened to be, he's from Denver, I'm from Denver. We never knew each other before. We met in a bar in Oaxaca. And we became best friends after that. We're still very close. But the fact that I knew the families in the film,
right, was meant to be,
gave me a deeper perspective on how to work it. Yeah, it was really bizarre. And so when I came back to Denver, Stefan reached out to me. He's like, I know you're a journalist and a writer, and you actually know these families, the personalities of the people. I've got 4 buckets of film from these 4 different families, but I don't have a narrative, and I thought you'd be a good person to help me with that. And I said, yeah, it'd be my pleasure. Yeah. And so we spent about 6 weeks in his apartment at the end of 2018, just drafting it out. We had a dry erase board, we had note cards on the floor, and it was about as simple as that, but it was very hard because everything was shot in Zapotec. Yeah. The raw footage. Right. So we had to get all the raw footage subtitled before we could dig into it. Usually you could take all your footage into the editing room and you can listen to it. It's just like
Sure.
it's almost like an automatic.
So you have to translate everything, even if you're not using it.
Yeah, it was a very
Yeah.
slow, laborious process.
Wow.
And we just kind of
How
trenched
many
it.
hours of footage did you have?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure that Stefan would probably know, but I'm sure it was. I mean, they shot, which is impressive. They shot 18 consecutive days in Oaxaca. They were sleeping at the Palenque. They were shooting 10-hour days. It was rugged. It was rough, but you know, dozens and dozens of hours, maybe over 100 hours. I'm not sure. In 18 days, I'm sure it's over 100 hours of footage, and we edited that down. Danny, the editor, and the team from New York did all that post-production work, you know, and I was just working with Stefan every day because we lived together in Denver, just braiding these 4 narratives together, these beautiful families, and we came up with what you see now. It's something we're very proud of.
So sometimes documentaries, people have the story going into it or film it, right?
Yeah.
And then sometimes you just film everything kind of with an idea and then create the story from the footage, right?
I think Stefan definitely had a vision on telling the story of the generational connection of mezcal and the cultural importance in the societal fabric of it in Oaxaca.
Yeah.
But I know that he was very open to what he was going to discover. You know, this is a culture and a topic that things will surprise you daily. You know, I've lived here for 5 years and I learned something new every day, thankfully.
Yeah.
And so I know he came down here with a certain perspective, but he definitely didn't have a script as far as that goes. He wanted to tell the story, the general idea, and he got amazing footage. There's some scenes that he told me that were shot with like the most beautiful lighting, or things kind of went off the rails, but it was like a beautiful thing where it actually took the shoot in a different direction. So
yeah, I've only seen the trailer, and I mean the cinematography looks amazing, but I can't wait to watch the full film.
It is. It's
So you weren't here for the filming of it.
I was here while Stefan was shooting it, but I wasn't involved. I was just working at the bar.
You weren't on this,
Yeah, it was very weird. After shooting one night, they came into town and came to the bar that I was working at. And the owner of the bar was also connected to the film because the producers in the film, the mezcal producers in the film, were connected to this man's brand. And so the crew came into the bar one night, and the bar owner came over to me and said, "Hey, there's some guys here from Denver shooting. I think you might know them.
Yeah.
You're a journalist and a photographer from Denver, and this guy is also a filmmaker and photographer from Denver." I said, "Are you kidding? Are you serious?" He's like, "Yeah, he's right over there." I go over and introduce myself to Stefan. Saturday night, we're busy. And we talked for like 5 minutes. We lived in the same neighborhood. We had mutual friends.
Crazy.
And now we're great friends. Yeah. It was another just.
Does he live here? He lives there now.
Stefan lives in Denver.
Oh, okay.
He's still very successful.
But he's here now, right now?
In Oaxaca, no.
Oh, okay.
No, he comes back and forth. He's been here. He got married here. I officiated the ceremony.
Oh, cool.
He has a huge passion for Oaxaca. That's why he shot the film here, or shot this whole concept in the first place. But yeah, it was a great connection, and yeah, happy to be a part of that.
Cool.
Didn't see it coming, but I'm truly honored by it. We're very proud of what we did.
Yeah. I always like to get into the origin story. Like, how did you get here?
Sure.
Obviously you were a journalist and found yourself working in film, but like, what did you want to be when you grew up? Like, where did you grow up? Give us the whole.
Sure.
Yeah.
I grew up in Casper, Wyoming. I grew up in the Rockies.
Okay.
I had family in Denver area, which is where I've lived for the last 15 years before I moved to Oaxaca. But no, I fell in love with photography very early on. I was a teenager. I had a skateboard in one hand and a camera in the other, and a lot of friends that were in the music scene. And you know, this is in the mid in the mid 90s. There was something in the water there, but we were cranking out some really good punk rock and just some great counterculture that was happening up there. And we'd go to Denver quite a bit.
Cool.
But yeah, I never played an instrument. But I was always very close to music, and I basically was a documentary photographer in my teen years, and I worked on the newspaper staff and the yearbook staff in high school. So I kind of got a
So
taste for journalism at that age.
you figured out what you wanted to do or what you were into pretty early.
I did.
Yeah, that's cool.
It was something that just, I remember the first day of journalism school, well, it was high school, and the teacher was saying like, all right, who wants to be the sports editor? And someone raised their hand. Who wants to be, the news department anchor? And I was just waiting for him to say photographer. So I figured the first person to put his hand up would get the job, and that's all I wanted to do was make photos, and I started doing that, and that went into college.
Cool.
I went to college in Casper as well. I got a fine art photography degree. And I'm old enough now, I'm like, this is all like last century. I was the last photographer in my high school to shoot on film. I graduated in 1999.
Yeah.
I'm 43 now, and
Okay.
there was this transitional point,
Yeah.
but I continued with my photography. I had filmmaker friends, but I continued with my photography. I had a darkroom, and eventually transitioned into digital work, but I really love shooting film.
Yeah.
But yeah, after 2 years of community college, I thought I was going to take a little time off and travel and kind of maybe move to Denver and finish my degree, which is what I did. 10 years later.
Yeah, that's fine.
My gap year turned into a gap decade.
Sure.
But I never stopped pursuing what I wanted to do, which was to travel and to take photos and to meet people. And I did several photo exhibitions. I was fairly successful with that for years. And then I moved to Denver and completed my journalism degree. But I always was diligent with my craft. I did a lot of stuff that didn't pay well. I did some stuff for free just to kind of give myself a foot in the door.
Yeah.
I was not motivated by money as much as it was about the experience and making connections, because those things are very valuable, down the road.
Right. Like social capital and investing in yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And enjoying yourself too. I mean, I have family members that were artists. My uncle was a painter. He lived in Mexico for almost 30 years. And he was an inspirational figure on the creative side of life for me. He had a great life. He wasn't rich. He wasn't necessarily famous, but he did very well for himself here. And he was one of the happiest dudes I knew.
Good examples. Yeah. I get it.
So that was my foundation of this kind of job. And I definitely had a passion for journalism as well, which is a lot more storytelling and art than most people might think. Being a fine art photography background, and then I went to journalism school, I thought it was going to be much more rigid, less aesthetically driven, but which is entirely not the case. I mean, I learned so much about photography and cinematography.
So you're a photojournalist.
I was a photojournalist at the beginning, and then what essentially is common now is like a multimedia journalist is what my degree is in.
Okay.
So I worked in radio in Denver. I shot film. I was a photographer and I was a reporter. Okay. And you'd have to go out and report a story entirely by yourself. It's not like the good old days, or
I've seen people doing that, where they set up their own camera, they're doing their own makeup, like.
That's entirely what happens now.
Yeah.
Network television does that. You might have a 2-person crew.
Yeah.
Shooting.
What about hecklers? I feel like you'd get heckled on the street or like.
Oh, it's part of the job. As a journalist, I've been spit at, I've been threatened, I've been harassed, just for being the messenger. Right. And that's essentially as simple as and sad as it is. Yeah. But this is how it is. I've never been shot at. In the line of work. So but that's part of being a journalist, being a storyteller, and film is part of that as well. Right.
And what do you focus on now for journalism?
So after working out of college, I had a full-time job at a newspaper outside of Denver, and I was doing daily reporting, covering topics in this small community. This was in 2016, so I covered the Clinton-Trump race. We did hard news. Okay. But it was a long drive. It was about an hour one way from where I lived in Denver, and rain or shine or sleet, snow. I mean, it was kind of a hard thing after a while. So I shifted back into focusing on work in Denver for a magazine called Westword that I've worked with for a long time. And I've always liked to write about food, especially international food and the culture that's created through cuisine kind of community building through food. And I've kind of focused on that now in the last 5 years. I've traveled the world a lot, kind of eaten my way through my travels, my stomach is kind of the compass for me. So, and now I just essentially like to tell stories about food and culture, and living in Oaxaca, it's a great place to do that.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. And you've been down here 5 years.
Yeah.
Okay.
I moved here at the end of 2019, decided I wanted to move here. I met a girl and,
Met her in Denver?
she's from Oaxaca. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. We got married last year. So it was a story that thank you. Yeah.
Cool.
Fell in love with Oaxaca, and then I fell in love with the Oaxaqueña,
Yeah.
as I say. And it just snowballed from there. And I've lived here since right before, I moved here on New Year's Eve, 2019.
Okay.
Which
Right
is a great,
before the pandemic.
before everything stopped.
Wow.
So it was a good place to be. I quarantined here,
Yeah.
and it was good.
Uh-huh.
As far as that goes,
Yeah, right.
it was very difficult for a lot of people and families here.
Sure.
But it's a resilient culture. It's a beautiful country.
It is so beautiful.
The Mexican community is.
It's my first time here. It's so beautiful.
It is
The aesthetic and the taste level and the execution of the art and just design of the community and the public art. It's just, I work in public art as one of my things, and it's just like things are just so beautiful here.
It's an inspiring culture. I mean, Mexico in general is just so complex and broad and profound that the rest of the world definitely knows that, and I'm hoping that Americans from the US can kind of appreciate it more. But after living here for a few years, my wife and I started a tour company. So we do these small group cultural tours, and we take people out to visit producers who mezcal, or families that make hand woven rugs, like this one, for example.
Oh, wow.
So we're very connected to the cultural crafts that are indicative of different villages around Oaxaca. So we like to share that with people in these small group trips.
And you're probably hosting people from United States and all over the world.
All around the world.
Yeah.
And it's very cool. And the more people that we get, the more excited we are about, just sharing this culture with people. Like I said, there's a perspective from the United States that is kind of skewed in a different way than the rest of the world. I mean, there's visitors from all around the globe that come to Oaxaca, and they know exactly how amazing it is, or Mexico in general.
Yes.
But there's more than a little bit of skepticism, I think, in the American psyche about what it's like in Mexico.
Completely.
And so
I don't know if it's the media or what, but they've done a number on, especially people in the suburbs that are afraid, like suburban Denver at least, like that are afraid to go to Mexico.
It's easy to disseminate bad news from here.
Yeah.
It's lazy, it's not accurate, it's
everything
shallow.
Isn't accurate about all the things I've ever heard, and I've been spending a lot of time down here in the last year, and it's like, it's beautiful. Everyone is really entrepreneurial, hardworking. Yeah, I know. It's so like, I'm just, the more time you spend down here, and for you especially, like, it's just so upsetting how people view Mexico, Mexicans, and of course with all the Trump.
I'm just happy to convert some minds, I mean, if they find themselves here, that's pretty awesome because they're spending their time and money to be here. But there's some people that come here and they must have a certain preconceived notion, because at the end of a tour with us, like a day trip, they've told us like, wow, this is way cooler than I thought. I didn't expect it would be like this. This is so cool. Well, there you go,
Yeah.
We're not creating anything, we're just sharing what's happening. So.
Beautiful people, like the food, like I've not had a bad meal. But yeah, like before I came to Mexico City in August, I was like, I had only been to like Tijuana, Cancun, like, touristy, all inclusives and all that. And it's just, my perspective has totally changed even. And I wasn't like scared or anything, but it's just,
it's a learning process. Travel is about learning.
That's why people should travel.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But yeah, I could totally just live down here.
Yeah.
I haven't had a bad meal ever.
No.
Yeah.
Well, what happened was, I guess, to pick up where we
we'll just
kind of got cut off, is like so I was working at the magazine and was writing about food and culture in the city, but I also grew up in the restaurant service industry, And so my friend Brian Rossi opened a small mezcal bar called Palenque, which was the first of its kind, and at least in that part of the country, in the Rockies. But
Right. Oh, really?
it was one of a
Okay.
small number of like dedicated mezcal bars with high-end, small batch traditional mezcal. We had a big back bar, but it was all like quality stuff. We were very focused on supporting family ran brands. I went in there on a Saturday because I'd heard about it, and I was blown away. And I came back on Monday with my resume, and I said, I need to work here. I went in there on a Saturday because I'd heard about it, and I was blown away. And I came back on Monday with my resume, and I said, I need to work here. And I knew the general manager, Marisa, and she said, that'd be great, let's do it. And so what I thought would be a nights and weekends job while I was freelancing turned into like this beautiful, life-changing job where I ended up working for about 3 years, running this mezcal bar. And during that time, Brian, the owner, is like, you need to take a month off. I want to send you to Oaxaca to immerse yourself for a month, learn about the culture, learn about the process. Because we take a lot of pride in sharing this stuff, you know, same concept with the film, the Sons of Mezcal. It's a cultural product at its very least. And at its most powerful, it is like a deep, important, sentimental part of people's lives. And so to be selling it at a bar or to be telling a story about it on film, it's a very important thing, you know. There's a lot of cultural weight to that. And so working at the mezcal bar, it was important for me to come here and learn as much as I could. So I lived here for a month, and it was absolutely life-changing. But the coincidence was, you know, like meeting Stefan here while he was shooting the film.
It's not even a coincidence.
Oh, it was meant to be.
The wheels were set in motion.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so he was shooting the film, and we just became friends, and it was a beautiful concept. And where the story kind of goes from there is after he goes back to Denver after shooting. He's a very successful food photographer and restaurant photographer in Denver. He has a big boy job back in Denver, and I came back to Denver and got back to work at the restaurant. And he called me one day. He's like, I've got these 4 buckets of film. You know the families, and you know, let's do this. I think you'd be a great person to help craft the narrative. And that's where that started, was how do you create the story for this film? Because we had it.
Sounds impossible to me.
It was slightly daunting. I mean, we sat around and talked to each other for a couple of days about how we're going to do it. Where do we start? You know, we had the footage essentially translated, subtitled for us. But you know, what I learned in this process, and I learned as like a writer and a journalist, is that if you let the subject do a lot of the telling, the story will kind of present itself. But then there's also about 1,000 different ways you could tell the same story.
Yes, I know.
You know, and I've struggled with structure a lot as far as like sitting down with the story.
And how do you know when you're done? You know.
Or you know, or how do you know if this is the right one? I've written the same story,
the right version. I know,
2 or 3 times. You know, and you know, I've been inspired by different filmmakers.
It's like alternate realities you could create out of this film.
Yeah, I mean,
there's footage.
There's different ways to tell, but the story is kind of consistent. And what we knew was documented on film. So we knew what these people were saying, and it was our job to kind of braid it together. And we had a fun time, and to embrace the process and to enjoy the challenge is something I learned. You know, it's no fun to like sit and like sweat bullets like and tell yourself I can't. It's more like, okay, how?
I'm all about the process, like of everything. Because if it's not, if the process is miserable, that's where you're spending most of the time.
I mean, if you do research on Kubrick or Coppola or Scorsese is another one I like. In this context, like they'll do research for months, and they'll diagram out scenes meticulously, you know, and that's just one process that some people have. And we were a little more organic. I'd say Stefan and I kind of did like almost like a hopscotch thing where we started a scene and we know where we want it to end. And so we kind of started at the beginning, like, okay, if he's here, then we have some footage from here. And we kind of just pieced it together.
Did you have to reshoot, or
no,
were you missing?
No, we had everything we needed, but we were very focused. This is something I love to tell people, is like we had a concept where we didn't want to do a formulaic style of a documentary. There's no talking heads, there's none of
Yes.
that. We just wanted to tell two stories at the same time.
Mhm.
If you do any research on mezcal documentaries, they kind of just tell you almost like overly direct. This is how you make mezcal. You harvest it in the field, you cook it, you crush
Right.
it, you ferment it. If you want to know how to make mezcal, just Google it. We're not going to
Right.
waste your time watching our film to show you how it's made.
Right.
So we followed these four families on a timeline that starts a few weeks before Easter. And the film culminates on that Easter with like this batch of special mezcal that they made.
Mhm.
So the story follows the families in a chronological order where they're like out in the field. And then it's a subtle timeline.
Mhm.
So the opening scenes are in the field harvesting the mezcal, and then they're cooking it and crushing it and fermenting it and distilling it.
Mhm.
But you're also following the generational connection. You're watching grandkids and grandparents work together.
Yes.
So we were very, once we had that epiphany, like we should do it like this.
Yeah.
They can still see how it's made,
Mhm.
but they're also just following these families through their daily life.
Yeah.
Um,
And what were like some of the anecdotal stories you have from filming, or any like surprises?
there's an opening scene that I think is really endearing where one of the younger kids in one of the families is out there harvesting agaves with his dad.
Mhm.
And living here and seeing these families. I mean, he's a grown man now. This was shot 6 years ago, and going from 14 to 20,
Mhm.
there's a lot that happens in those 4 years. And so I see
Sure.
him now, I'm like, wow, you're an incredible guy. But
Mhm.
back then, he was talking about getting blisters on his hands, and he had a long sleeve shirt because it was sunny out, and they like pass his fingers. He just looks like a floppy little teenager that doesn't
Mhm.
want to go to work with his dad.
Yeah.
And that final scene, not to give that away too much, but it definitely, we were able to have the right footage at the right moment to put a sharp little point on the whole concept, where there's grandchildren and grandparents and whole families, and
Mhm.
a cool metaphorical kind of quote at the end.
Mhm.
I've watched it many times. We've had screenings. We screened it. The world premiere was in Denver
Oh.
at the Mayan Theater.
Oh, cool.
We screened it here in Oaxaca City at the Teatro Macedonia, which is like the Carnegie Hall of Oaxaca. And I remember Stefan and I saying, wouldn't it be cool one day if we screened it in Oaxaca, like
Yeah.
totally sarcastically? And that dream came true.
Mhm.
It's an emotional film. Watching it with the Mezcaleros and the families in Oaxaca was one of the highlights of my life, to be
Mhm.
totally honest, on a creative and kind of personal level, to put so much time into telling their story and for them to appreciate what we did so much that we were all
Mhm.
crying at the end of the film.
Mhm. Oh,
We lost money on this. Nobody made any money.
yeah, that
Stefan
was my next
funded,
question
he
about
funded 90% of
funding.
it.
Uh-huh.
He had great support from Barback, which is the company that imports the mezcal with the families featured.
Okay.
They were huge supporters of it, but Stefan it was an independent project, and
Mhm.
that's kind of what I like to remind young filmmakers or young journalists, young artists, anyone, just have to keep going forward and love the work because you love the work.
Right.
And the personal satisfaction is kind of invaluable.
Mhm. And we can watch it on Apple TV on.
It's on Zulu, it's on Apple, it's on Amazon.
Mhm.
And so after we had the world premiere, we screened it around the country. We submitted to film festivals, which was a hustle, but it was a happy hustle,
Yeah, what film festivals?
Stefan submitted it, and it's funny, that's another lesson learned, is like you get really good feedback, but at the end of the day, you get a no answer,
Mhm.
Toronto, Sundance, Tribeca all gave us really good feedback, but they said it's just not going to work for us this time.
Mhm.
Netflix, same thing. They said this is great. They were in a restructuring phase at that time, and
Mhm.
so they passed on it. But we had screenings around the country, and eventually the landing point was a streaming platform. And we're very, very proud of the fact that people can watch it around the world now,
Like, how does streaming work? Like, how does it work? You make your own film, you
Mhm.
self-funded, like, how do you?
Stefan's father is in the film industry.
Okay.
He grew up in California. and he had some connections there that were essentially agents in Hollywood, but instead of representing an actor, they represent a project. So this guy was,
Okay,
to boil it down, he's essentially shopping around your film to platforms.
Okay.
So he knows the guy at Netflix, he knows the guy at
Mhm.
Hulu, and he presents it on your behalf.
okay.
The money side of
Yeah, I
streaming,
think that's,
I don't know a lot about it.
yeah,
I know that Stefan, you get a percentage, I believe, of like, views.
Yeah.
But
you do have to, like, not anyone can just put their film on Apple TV.
no, you have to submit it. There's a process
Mhm.
that Stefan knows about. I
Mhm.
was
Like, they have to approve it, they won't just put anything.
no,
on
they
their
have to
platform.
basically accept it. It's like kind of getting signed to like a
Yeah,
record label. You send them your album,
yeah,
but instead of a demo, it's like it's the finished album.
Right.
Yeah, it's kind of a
yeah,
interesting concept that way. But yeah, Stefan was working on that. We all worked in a collaborative way throughout the whole film. Stefan was working on this technical side of getting it landed on a streaming platform, which is kind of where films land these days.
Yeah.
Same with
which
music.
I'm so glad those exist now,
Yeah.
you know?
I love the film concept, and we screened it in like a 1920s Art Deco theater in Denver on purpose. Like
Yeah.
we're sentimental and romantic about the
I
the
love
film
light.
and theater side. But it's also a digital world, and this is a great advantage for a lot of people. The fact that if I have a friend in Italy that I talk to and I say, hey man, go to your
Yeah.
Amazon platform, you can watch this film I made. And he did that. It was like a really amazing concept.
Yeah. And it's a more democratic platform, like you don't, I mean, yes, they do select you or approve you, but
Sure.
there's so much more content
There is, and it opens
without
up.
it being like, curated by, TV.
I think the internet opens up a
thing.
lot of
Yeah.
opportunities, as like being like a freelance journalist, I know that I could basically create my own website and share links to the stories I've done. I can kind of create my own personal brand.
Yeah.
Whereas in the past, if you didn't have a job at a newspaper or magazine, you were kind of just like
Right.
floating out in the space.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's a lot of similarities to that, like in the film
Yeah.
industry as well, where you can produce a film like we did. You can work hard with a team of people that you want to surround yourself with, and
I mean, you could
and
even
make
do
it go.
webisodes and,
Yeah.
the people that have come up like through the internet on like YouTube and webisodes that have ended up getting like,
Totally. We didn't know where it was going to go. At the
Yeah.
end of the day, if we had to just host it on sonsofmezcal.com and just drive traffic there, that was our expectation.
Yeah.
And you just have to keep your expectations balanced with personal satisfaction, creative satisfaction. It's going to be a hard job to make money at, like to be rich and famous.
Yeah.
Should not be your motivation.
Right.
You can have a cool little apartment and say you wake up and work every day in something you love.
That to me, that's success.
Oh,
Yeah. Doing work that doesn't feel like work, that's
Yeah.
my passion. Like, I really don't, as long as I have enough money to live, like.
And enough money for mezcal.
Yes,
So we're in
have some.
Oaxaca.
Yes.
This is the heartland of mezcal. Agave spirits are made all around the country.
Okay.
It's kind of extra renowned in Oaxaca because there's so much of it made here.
Yeah.
There's dozens of different agave plants that grow here. The culture connected to mezcal production is very profound. It's a very important part of society in a lot of different villages. And so it's more than like we say in the film, it's much more than like an intoxicating spirit. It's actually a sacred part of daily life.
Okay.
They bless children with it when they're born. You use it in funerals,
Really?
birthdays, baptisms, weddings.
Okay.
A lot of mezcaleros drink it with a lot of reverence. They're not sitting out there in the barn chugging mezcal all
What's
day.
a reverence?
Like they drink it with a lot of reverence, like just with a lot of respect.
Yeah.
And
It
so
was medicinal.
very much so,
Or still.
And this is at least a 500-year tradition, like making this stuff. And so in Oaxaca, it's a very exciting cultural touchstone. It
Mhm.
really opens up a very clear portal to the culture in a way that food does or art.
Mhm.
So it's
Yeah, I have a new appreciation for it, like,
yeah.
I feel like maybe I'm late to the party, but mezcal's having a moment, like, for the last few years.
The last 10 years,
Yeah.
it's
Like,
skyrocketed in a lot of ways, and hopefully that growth is done in healthy ways. It's not, that's definitely not happening in all sectors, but there's families that are doing it traditionally, and that was a part of the film that we were very focused on, was showcasing the traditional culture, the families that are making it out of passion, not out of profit. So
cheers. So we smell it first.
it's like little, and it's just, we say besitos, just little kisses, little sips, you know, you can,
Oh,
it's a little
besitos.
half
Cute.
glass, but
Oh,
abrazos from Oaxaca, hugs from Oaxaca to all you guys out there
Abrazos,
watching and
besitos.
listening. Thank you for letting me be a part of this.
yeah,
Beautiful, right?
I love it.
Watching
Yeah.
Sons of Mezcal with a mezcal in your hand is
Uh-huh.
about the closest thing to like a 4D experience.
Yes, like immersive.
The sound design that
Mhm.
Adam and these guys did. Jackson was the editor, or Jackson was the cinematographer.
Mhm.
Our friend Eduardo in Mexico City did the original score. It is a textural film, this with sound design and cinematography and music that really, it's one of the things I'm proudest of is of the film. It's like the actual sensory experience that you get, and then drinking a mezcal while you're watching it.
Yeah,
It's about as close
you
as you
have
can.
to drink
It's
mezcal while you watch
teleported.
it. You
It
have
really
to.
is.
Okay.
Get yourself some good mezcal and watch Sons of Mezcal and thank me later.
Sons of Mezcal.
And we're very proud of it, and we're just continuing to share it, even though it's kind of lived out its cycle. It's on it's streaming, but we're still sharing the story.
Yeah.
And you know, the story continues. Maybe there'll be a Sons of Mezcal dose.
What about Daughters of Mezcal?
I mean, that would be a great thing too. The
I met some woman-run family,
100%.
Mezcal family yesterday.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The matriarchal system of mezcal production is amazing. The women run the world, and they should. And I grew up with women, and I love everything about women taking the lead. And in the mezcal culture, that is a big thing too. And they're respected equally in the communities that I know. And yeah, it'd be amazing to focus on storytelling.
That's
from,
part two.
you know, yeah.
Yeah. Or you follow up, I'd be interested to know about, you know, the kid you said grew up.
Sure.
And what he's
It's
feeling
a
now.
documentary film.
Yeah.
Life is still happening. And so going back and to see these families, it's a beautiful thing, and to document just a part of it with as much passion and skill as possible. That's the driving force with documentaries.
Yeah.
No, Santa Fe's great.
Let's talk about Santa Fe.
I love that town, that creative energy that I found there reporting. You know, I would spend time there while I was in college. We'd go down and report on stories. I met the Meow Wolf crew in their nascent stage. You know, this is like 2014, I think, is when I first met them.
How did that happen?
We were it was a upper level reporting class at Metro State, where I went to school in Denver.
Okay.
And so we would do a semester long class where we'd prepare stories. You know, we'd do research and set up assignments. It was essentially like a work study, field study. And we'd go down to Santa Fe for 4 or 5 days and report on real stories, interview real people, write articles, and then pitch them to actual publications. And so it was real world experiences in journalism school. And I researched this group of guys doing this like kind of avant immersive art stuff. And it was called Meow Wolf. I said, this sounds interesting. And I found Vince doing Omega Mart in a strip mall.
I wish I had seen that.
On like the south end of town. And it was the first phase of like what became their famous trajectory. And I came back about a year, I think it was about maybe a year and a half later. And they were in the phase of gutting and building Meow Wolf in the bowling alley. And I reached out to Vince. He said, yeah, the people are down there. You could, you know, I'll give you access to it. And so I went in there, but they were building it out. It was unbelievable. And and now in Denver, the connection between Denver and Santa Fe, there's a massive meow wolf there. And I remember,
and then the Omega Mart in Las Vegas.
yeah, it's very cool. And I met some other people in that circle of like local artists. I remember Erica Wanamaker, they call her the Ditch Witch. She was one of the original early artists in the Meow Wolf collaborative. I remember spending nights. We stayed at the El Rey before it was remodeled. And I loved it. I loved it because it was such like
I was just there last week.
It's a great place. And I like what they've done to it too, but
I don't think I've stayed before it was remodeled.
It was a very endearing Americana style Southwest roadside hotel.
Yeah.
It was so awesome.
It was cool. Yeah.
We'd stay there, and there was a bar downtown that was like downstairs.
The Matador.
Yes.
Yes, that's my favorite.
Holy God, that's
I go every time I'm there. I used to go to the Palace also when it was the Palace, but
the Matador,
it is the most interesting mix of people down there.
Yeah.
Like
I'd walk by La Fonda and be like, that looks cool. I don't think I could afford those drinks. I love it. I grew up in Wyoming. I love the aesthetic, but going downstairs to the Matador and having a beer and a shot after a long day of writing and reporting it's a beautiful theme. And it's not unlike Oaxaca where like there's creative energy. It's almost palpable.
Yeah.
The light down here. I mean, there's a lot of parts of Oaxaca that remind me of Santa Fe. And I don't know if it sounds too cheesy or whatever, but I've told people in the past, like Oaxaca just feels like if San Francisco and Santa Fe had a baby. There's aesthetics to both that like kind of meld it down.
You know what? Since I've been here, I lived in San Francisco for 11 years. And I've even, especially in this neighborhood, I'm like, I could be in San Francisco right now. Yeah.
Yeah, I think people should definitely look at visiting Oaxaca. It's a beautiful part of the country, but in general, just looking closer at Mexico, it's a super complex nation. And people think I'm being sarcastic when I say it, but it is 10 times more diverse than the United States. You think someone from Louisiana is different from someone from New York? It's just like that in Mexico. But they don't even speak the same language. They don't eat the same food. They don't have the same clothes, the same music. I mean, it is vastly different in the US. But you come to a nation like this, it's, thousands of years old. Don't ever try to tell anyone that Mexico is just kind of a homogenous
I think that's the perception a lot of people have.
And travel is about learning and challenging yourself. I mean, I like to go kick back on a beach, but why don't you try to do it in a place that maybe you don't know the language, but maybe research it a little bit. It's exciting. Why go to the same sandals resort in Montego Bay 5 times in 5 years? I know someone has done that before, and I'm like, why?
And it is a little adventurous, but it's also very comfortable. Like it's very easy here in Mexico City. Like, they have everything you need.
Sometimes finding a challenge is also rewarding. I've learned that. The film Sons of Mezcal kind of taught me that too. Taking raw footage in Zapotec. I mean, you're starting like less than zero. It's enough stress like going to like the editing suite. You're like, okay, I know I have the footage almost memorized. This was like you're starting at like a basic state of like, okay, what did he just say? And you have to go back and watch the same the same segment 5 times. It's very slow. But if you have a vision for it and you're like, you enjoy the challenge, you just have to be patient.
And the process.
Stefan and I would work all afternoon. I'm like, well, I got to go to work I was working during the day in his apartment. And then I'd have to wrap it up and go work at the mezcal bar, which is fun because I was like immersed in like this mezcal.
It's all not,
But we would work all afternoon, like, Larry, how much did we get done? And he's like, well, I think if we did this right, we send this over to Danny to edit, I think we got a good like 60, 90 seconds. And that was like progress.
You have to love it. You have to love the process.
That was process. That was progress.
Well, I can't wait to watch it. And maybe I'll watch that on the plane back.
Only if you really want to really make yourself miss Oaxaca extra bad. Watch it as Oaxaca's in the rearview mirror.
Well, I'm definitely gonna be back.
Maybe watch it this afternoon before you go out and get your final mezcal.
Right, yeah.
But if anyone does want to visit Oaxaca, my
Mhm.
wife and I do have that.
Yes.
We do have,
Make sure this is in here.
sure.
Yeah.
If anyone does want to visit Oaxaca,
Uh-huh.
my wife and I started a small cultural tour business here, and it's our pleasure and it's our passion, and we take it very seriously, like just simply connecting people to the culture of Oaxaca that we know.
Mhm.
She's from here, I've lived here
Mhm.
for several years, and so we advocate for the traveler, we advocate for the culture.
Yes.
We don't want people to come to Oaxaca and get a false interpretation of it, like
Mhm.
mezcal smoky, they eat mole and crickets and
Mhm.
that's it.
Yeah.
We're really trying to push back on stereotypes,
Yes.
which is a parallel theme with the film. You know, we really want to tell the true story of these families.
Mhm.
But yeah, if people would like to come to Oaxaca and visit the families that make mezcal or these other things.
And how long are the tour, like you have short and long
We
tours,
do
like?
day trips where we
Uh-huh.
could take people out and go visit a couple of mezcal producers or a
Mhm.
family that makes these beautiful hand woven rugs and come back.
Mhm.
Or we're really focused on doing package trips where we can talk with people as they're planning out their trip to Oaxaca.
Mhm.
And we do 5 to 7 day fully
Oh,
inclusive
wow.
itineraries
Okay.
where you just have to pay for your airfare to get here because people might be coming from different places.
Mhm.
But we'll take care of everything, you know. We call it deep dives. And
Mhm.
our company is called Almas Viejas, which means old souls.
Okay.
Because we're very much connected to that older culture, you know.
Mhm. So you have people come in from all different places and go
That's
together?
our intention, is like moving forward. We're working on our first trip in January.
Love that.
So starting in January 2025,
Uh-huh.
if people would like to reach out to us at almasviejasoax.com,
Uh-huh.
they can find us on Instagram too. Basically, we'd like to get with them while they're planning out their trip to
Yes.
Oaxaca and
Uh-huh.
say, hey, we want to come to Oaxaca. These are our dates. Like, okay. And we'll organize trips throughout we'll set up the whole itinerary. So they get a
And
really,
you're on a trip with other people from other places?
we prefer to do it with groups that create themselves. So
Okay.
if it's like, say, 3 couples that they all travel together.
Yes,
or
I know
4
people that,
Yeah.
or,
We like to do 4 to 8 people,
uh-huh.
small groups, locally owned hotels and restaurants that we work with. It'll be a full package. It's all designed. We can tweak it any way you want. You want to spend a few days on the beach.
Mhm.
You like mezcal.
And you go with them?
We'll be with them the whole
Yeah.
time. Yeah, it's like a
And so you
private.
can translate. Are you fluent? You must be fluent
I'm
now.
decent enough. My wife
Yeah.
is brilliant with English
Yeah.
and Spanish. I'm definitely highly functional.
Yeah.
But I also find myself talking like a 4-year-old that got dropped on his head a lot of times. But no, it's an important part for us to like connect with the culture on a
Mhm.
daily basis. We live here, but we also want to share it with people too. And so
Mhm.
that's what we do. It's all about food and art and mezcal and culture.
And you still write for Denver?
I write for
The
outlets in
Westword.
Denver,
Uh-huh.
and other places around the country.
Mhm.
I write stories from here and I pitch them. And
Mhm.
when I go back to the United States for my summer trip,
Mhm.
I write stories from there. Everywhere from writing stories from my hometown in Wyoming to
Oh, cool.
a very kind of intense and investigative piece I did about a first person perspective of a migrant who crossed from Oaxaca into the US. I'm pitching that story to a national publication.
Important.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's about storytelling. It's about finding
Mhm.
stories that you're passionate about,
Mhm.
and that allows you to really give yourself a lot to the story, and you end up
Mhm.
creating really good work.
Mhm.
I couldn't really work too much longer at like that newspaper I was at because I just couldn't find the passion behind the rezoning of a Napa parking lot, in a small town where one day they want me to cover their kids' t-ball game, and the next day they're telling me to go screw myself because I'm asking them, what brought you out to vote today?
Mhm. Mhm.
I love journalism, and it is one of the most important pillars in a democracy.
Yes.
But I found myself wanting to tell stories and contribute to that culture through different narratives.
Mhm.
I like to tell stories about the world through food
Yes.
and travel and stuff like that.
So you'll come to Santa Fe, I hope.
I
Will you
really-
come? I'm granting you a press pass to the Santa Fe
Ah,
International Film
that
Festival.
would be
Will you
amazing.
come?
When is
Yes.
that?
It's in October.
Okay.
I'm sure the new dates have been announced, but we just finished.
Okay.
We just wrapped.
That's exciting.
Yeah.
How'd it go
It's
this
great.
year? Yeah.
It's great. It's a very exciting year. We got Oscar recognition. I'm probably saying this wrong, but basically short films that win at the festival can now be submitted for Oscar
That's excellent.
competition.
That's amazing.
That's a big deal for
That
us.
is. That's very cool.
We had Bryan Cranston as he won
Okay.
our Lifetime Achievement Award. That was
Wow.
really cool.
Very cool.
What else happened? We had something else happen at the festival, but I think it's gonna be longer next year even. It's usually 5 days.
Okay.
But we just have an amazing selection of a short film. Like
Mhm.
our programmer, Derek Horn, he works at USC and just has such a passion for short film. He's
Very cool.
incredible. But just the selections of the films, it's amazing. Jacques and Lisette are the founders of the festival. It's
Okay.
brother, sister.
Oh, very cool.
Yeah, and it's very much like family
Mm-hmm.
run organization, but they just doing a great job, and Santa Fe is the perfect venue. Like,
Oh, yeah.
they have such great theaters, venues. We
Absolutely.
screen in museums.
Oh, yeah.
You know, the venues for the parties have really gotten really awesome
That's
lately. Inside museums and just in different restaurants.
It's a
and
cool
bars.
concept. Film
Yeah.
festivals are amazing. The
Yeah.
fact that they kind of infuse a city with a certain energy for a handful of days. It brings together a lot of people.
I've met, it's like summer camp for me.
Yeah.
Like, I've met
Yeah.
so many great friends at film festivals.
Yeah.
Like, I live in New York part-time.
Okay.
And I pretty much lived there because I met someone at the film festival who
That's
later
awesome.
had a room available, and
That's great.
I moved in there for a while, and now I've moved on to different rooms, but
Mhm.
you know, and all my friends in New York, like my whole network there is based on that festival.
That's
And
awesome.
filmmakers
Sure.
I met there
Sure.
who then introduced me to other friends.
Sure.
Yeah,
There's portals to communities,
the
you know.
portal, yeah.
Film is one,
Uh-huh.
art, mezcal. I mean, I
Yeah.
met my original network of friends was all through the mezcal / restaurant industry. But the film festival concept is something that I've seen in different parts of the world personally, firsthand, which I think is so fascinating. I remember being in Morocco for a moment, and there was a film festival that was happening there.
Yeah.
And in the main square, the main mercado, which is like over 1,000-year-old market, had a giant flat screen, and they were showing trailers and interview footage promoting the film festival. And I'm in downtown Marrakesh at night, and I see Martin Scorsese on a panel discussion. I was like,
Wow.
this is really amazing. Like,
Yeah.
this film is now a universal human concept.
Yes.
They have them in Mexico City, of course, but they also have them in like smaller parts of Mexico that my friends are involved in.
Oh, cool.
We have a lot of weekly screenings in Oaxaca.
Oh,
There's a small community here that does like smaller avant esoteric films that they'll screen once a week in this one place. It's really great. And you know, it's a whole night event. It starts at 5 and ends at midnight. The film itself is only 90 minutes. So what does that tell you? There's a lot of human interaction around the whole
like
concept.
any art, it like sparks dialogue and conversation, whether you love the film or hate it. You know, just like that's what you want art to do. And yeah, I just feel film festivals are like summer camp. Like,
That's great.
you find your people pretty quickly. You end up kind of going to the same things, or you just spot each other. And you end up, it's like one of those intense circumstances where it's short, everybody's doing the same thing, and then you just bond really quickly. It's like my favorite thing.
Well, you're there for a certain intention,
And
it's a lot different than trying to find deep personal connections in the line at the airport. You know, there's a lot of different people there. You're gonna find yourself like,
you're there for the same reason. A lot of people are there alone, or they just came with one other person, and then people are looking to talk and communicate.
That's a great
It's my
community
favorite.
building.
It is.
It's awesome.
It is.
Yeah.
I just went to Denver's also. I've been involved in that for the years.
Very cool.
They, same thing.
Yeah.
I know. I think I love film festivals. Like, I'm working. I hardly have time to go to the film. Like, I'll get screeners and stuff, but like, I'm usually working and sitting in a hotel room typing, and doing graphic design the whole time,
Yeah.
so. Like, that's the sweet potato person, I think. I don't know if you can hear the honking.
Yeah,
I forget.
there's a certain
There's different whistles.
mixtape
Yeah,
in Mexico that that guy's, I believe he could be selling sweet potato. No, he's selling
the whistle is the sweet potato.
the steam whistle is the sweet potato, because
Yeah.
they're actually they're steaming these sweet potatoes, and then he opens up the valve and it's like a loud ass whistle. The trash guy that comes by your house once a week, you have to like go outside as he passes.
Is that the bell?
That's a bell, like a
That's
cast
what it was in
iron
Mexico
bell.
City. It was every day when I was in Mexico City.
That's nice.
Like, how do they?
The trash, you
Yeah.
know, different cultures, different infrastructure systems. You just can't roll out your dumpster on the sidewalk. We don't even have dumpsters here. You have your own little trash vessel, but they pass on the same time on a certain day, and so you just have to be ready for me in my neighborhood, 10 o'clock Tuesday. They're very consistent.
Yeah.
It's one of the few things in Oaxaca that's always on time. Is the trash guy.
Yeah.
And everyone just comes out and drops their trash off.
Yeah.
Or at night, if you hear a certain sound, it's like the guy selling the elotes, like the steamed corn. I believe that guy's selling ice cream, if I remember right.
Okay.
But it's a cultural thing it's like you start to decode it as you live at a place for a long time.
Yeah.
Driving in Oaxaca is
Do you do that?
I do. And I'm still surprised every day at how it all functions. You know, I've learned to just keep my little bubble. I drive like an old lady, and if people honk and want to go around me, that's fine, because they're some of the wildest drivers I've ever seen in this town.
Yeah. Thanks for joining us. This has been Film Talk Weekly. I'm your guest host, Castle Cersei, here with Tony White, freelance journalist, storyline editor for Sons of Mezcal, available on Apple TV, Amazon, Zulu,
and there's a lot of info on sonsofmezcal.com.
Okay.
And
Instagram?
Yes, there's Instagram as well.